Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Paige Ryans, and today we're talking about one of my favorite events of the year, the 24th Annual Garden State Film Festival, New Jersey's premier independent film festival. Garden State Film Festival runs from March 26th through March 29th to Asbury Park in Cranford, New Jersey, with over 200 films from various countries screening across 9 different venues. It's 4 days packed with incredible independent cinema, features, documentaries, short films, filmmaker Q&As, industry panels, red carpet events, and after parties. It's truly such a fun time. Whether you're a filmmaker, a film lover, or just someone who loves a great story, this festival has something for everyone. Tickets are available now at gsff.org, right there, /tickets. And there will also be tickets available at the door while supplies last. And now let's get into our filmmaker interview for today. So I am here today with Frank Reynolds with his film Criterion. Frank, welcome. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're happy to have you here. We're happy to have you, spotlight your film and talk about your film. So, um, first, if you could just talk about your role with the film, and then we'll talk about, a little bit about the film and everything like
And
that.
well, I wrote and directed the film. I also edited. I'm an editor by trade. That's my day job. So I also did all the post on it.
Oh, wow. Awesome. So you were a few responsibilities with this film, which is
Yes,
great. That's
and
awesome.
and I work cheap in post because I do it as a day job. So and I know how to do it.
Okay. Okay. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Listen, hey, I get it. I get it. You do what you do. You do what you can do. So, and you can do it. So can you tell us a little bit about Criterion?
Sure. It's basically a sort of a modern vernacular telling of the devil tempting Christ in the desert of the gospel story. But I did it sort of the dialogue is modern, and I did it as more of a mythological telling than really focusing on religion. I like to think my two influences of this film are basically, I was educated by the Jesuits and I read a lot of comic books, and those two things that just kind of mashed together in my brain and came up with this movie.
Okay. Okay. And what would you say was your inspiration for writing or approaching the film from, that approach?
Um, as I said, I mean, I was taught by the Jesuits in high school, which has a very, they're priests, but they have a very scholarly approach to things. And at the same time, there was this kind of there was this kind of movement in comic books at the time in the 80s to become very more sophisticated and adult. And they touched on a lot of mythological themes. There were writers like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman, who has been canceled recently, and I'm not going to argue with that, but at the time his work influenced me greatly. And they had a really wonderful way of taking sort of like just the comic book tropes and applying to like religious and mythological themes in a way that was really fascinating, and just being combined with being taught by the Jesuits at the time was just a really interesting headspace to be in. You go to classes by the Jesuits, and then you go home and you read your comic books and they talk about the exact same thing they talked about in class, but in that sort of pop culture way, that sort of like you saw from a different light. Alan Moore's comics, he would basically have, the fall of, his characters, deal with angels and the fall of heaven in one issue, and then the next issue they're talking to Superman and Batman. So yeah, it took all these sort of pop culture and mythological tropes and just sort of like, mashed them together in a fascinating way. And I think a lot of that influenced why I wanted to make this movie.
Yeah, yeah. And a little bit about your filmmaking process, like the writing and also just kind of through the production, and you said editing as well. So can you share a little bit about that process and what that looked like for you?
And well, I've been an editor for 30 years, so I mean, of indie films and indie film features and things like that. So I worked in filmmaking for the past 30 years, and I just always wanted to direct something. I hadn't directed anything since I went to NYU Film School, and so I just thought I always wanted to try it. And this idea was kind of poking around in my head ever since college, ever since grad school. And, and part of it, both from a story point of view, and I also went to the American Film Institute for grad school. And the assignments at the American Film Institute for the first year, the directing students would have to go and direct a film in like 4 days, close to Los Angeles. And they would either have, a location close to Los Angeles or on their stage. And I always thought, what would I do if I were a directing student? What would be my project? And, this would essentially be it, which is exactly what I did. I shot for 4 days, 2 days in the desert outside LA and 2 days on the stage. So it's almost like my version of like, my of a grad student project had I been a directing student, basically.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. And you said the desert scene. I know like it was outside of LA.
It's about 30 miles outside of LA in Lancaster.
Okay. I knew that it had to be like an actual desert because
Totally. Yeah. It was and I shot in Los Angeles because I needed the desert, and I'm a New Yorker. So I basically cast and crewed locally and just flew myself out. I was the one non-local in the cast and crew. But I knew people in LA, and I knew how, I knew the infrastructure of LA. So I knew how to like, cast, and I knew how to like look for crew, and I knew LA physically because I had been there for grad school and I'd been there for work. So, traveling there was not a new experience for me. I knew LA very well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's funny kind of with you kind of being on that end of like having to travel to the location, but hey, you get to see, just like a different realm. Like, did you know that desert was there, or did you kind of like?
I did about 2 scouts in LA before we shot, and I found that one on the second scout. And I kind of knew I wanted to be close to LA. I didn't want people to travel very far. And so I scouted, and I knew Lancaster. I actually, a student project I worked on at the American Film Institute shot in Lancaster. So I knew that it could potentially hold the location I wanted. And it did.
Okay. Awesome. Wow. That's awesome. And I kind of wanted to just go a little bit back about just focusing kind of on the title, the Criterion. I feel like, or not that Criterion, just Criterion. Yeah. But what kind of inspired you to say that title? Because I feel like, when you think of Criterion, which is great, I think of Criterion, I think of like a standard, a test. And so kind of central to the story, what was your inspiration for the title?
It was honestly, it was just a little bit of dumb luck. I didn't want an overtly religious title. That was something I did not want. I didn't want to I didn't want something that felt like it was like be a Christian film or anything like that. I mean, I was fooling with temptation in the desert, and I didn't like it because it felt too much like the last temptation. It felt too much like the last temptation of Christ. So I didn't like that. And I think, honestly, this sounds crazy, but I think one day I was just throwing words in a thesaurus and seeing what it was spitting back at me. And I forget what word I put in, but Criterion was one of the ones that spit back. And I'm like, oh, I like that. Okay, that's the title.
Yeah.
So I even think when I was writing it, I didn't have a title.
Wow. I mean, I think that the thesaurus did great job because I think Criterion title, I feel like it captures kind of like the story and kind of, the synopsis well with me. It just sets the scene that, the source.com did help with that.
No, I'm very happy with the thesaurus for giving me that title. Yes. And it's one word.
They're not sponsored. Yes, I was going to say that as well. And it's just kind of like, it's perfect. I think great job. So you also did a part of that. We can't give the source all the credit because you were the one that put the words into the source. So
I put the prompt in. Yes.
Yeah, you were
I prompted it. Yes.
That's awesome. So what would you say was your favorite part of the process? And if there were any challenges, what were those challenges and how did you kind of navigate those?
I enjoyed shooting a lot more than I thought I would. I thought, I've been an editor for 30 years. I thought maybe, I'd grown too, accustomed to being a loner and being sort of like, the troll in the cave. working away on a computer. And I didn't know how much I'd enjoy, I didn't know how I'd react to the shooting process, but I really enjoyed being out there and shooting. Not that it wasn't challenging, and not that we didn't have issues we had to deal with, but I was kind of expecting to completely hate it, and just being obviously a necessary evil getting a movie made. But I actually really kind of enjoyed being out there. And the biggest challenge was, which actually turned out okay, but we were prepared for it to be a bigger issue than it was the desert, because we were shooting, close to Labor Day in the desert in, California, and we were prepared for it to be like, 105, 110 degrees. And thank goodness it only turned out to be like 85 degrees. But the other worry about was the wind, because Lancaster can get windy. And what we learned was around noon, it gets windy, and in the morning it's not. But because we can plan for the wind, we could plan around it. But we had to move location. Another thing was I shot in the desert because, if I have to shift locations, no one's going to notice. It's the desert. So we had to move a little bit because the wind was hitting us in a way we didn't like. And so we moved to a place where the wind was better for us. But no one noticed because it's the desert, basically. And so that worked out. That worked out better than I thought it would. And also our sound guy was fantastic. I don't know how he got like the sound he did in the wind he got. We didn't have to loop anything. We didn't have to ADR anything. It's all production dialogue. So he did a fantastic, Ariel Bermudez, he did a fantastic job. And there is wind in the movie, but like it's contained, and it looks good without it being a problem. And we also managed to compartmentalize it to a certain part of the scene, which was also a little bit of dumb luck, where like, it's nice and calm. Suddenly it wind for like that scene, then it goes nice and calm again. It worked out okay. And that was dumb luck. That was just, the film gods smiling us a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, just kind of thinking, I think the wind in the desert, like in the film, I don't think it's noticeable. So yeah. I think that's great. And even if it was a little bit, it's kind of like viewers are in the desert with, the
right,
film.
Yeah.
So.
And so it was, but we were prepared for it to be a real issue, and it, to a certain extent it was, but not so much that we couldn't work around it, which I was very, very pleased about. And now I look at it, I don't even think about it at all. I watch the movie now and I just look at it. I don't remember like the wind problems or anything like that. It
yeah.
just nice to cut around it.
That's
good. My biggest mistake that I say is sometimes I shot the reverse side of a conversation on another day, and this is totally my fault. Sometimes I didn't have the actors match their energy exactly, and it was something I noticed in editing, and I was like, oh, I messed that up. I should have been much more attuned to what the energy was on each day. But I managed to cut around it to the point where, again, I'm satisfied with the cut. Again, being an editor, I just sort of pulled out the old bag of tricks. But if I ever direct again, like that's something I'm going to be much, much more aware of.
Well, I could speak to, I think that you did a great job. That's just your editing skills coming in handy. And, I think the editing meshed perfectly. So.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Internally, that was like, I just said, oh, I messed that up. Like I have to do that. I have to be more careful next time.
Yes.
I'd be more observant next time.
Yeah. And I think that's just also second nature. Like, I think that's kind of like just, knowing when you create something and you see kind of what you want to do differently next time. I think that's also a part of growing. So, yeah, I think we're excited to just kind of, stay tuned with your next projects and see that applied next. But just, I think with this one, you did a really great job. The editing was really great and really sharp. What would you say you're hoping for audiences to get out of watching your film?
I think, using characters from, I don't want to offend anybody by saying mythology in coming with dealing with Bible characters, but and religious characters is, hopefully they're identifiable in some way. Hopefully, they react in ways that we would, and tell us something about ourselves. I think that's sort of the most interesting part of me about reading about characters in not only the Bible but even like Greek mythology and Roman mythology is about how they tell us about how we think and how we act and what we are as people. And how would the devil react to being to being pointed on going, you're the devil? How would any of us react if we were told that? And how would we feel if we were like suddenly decided to be like, it's only we would declare to be, the worst person in existence, and how would that person then go and treat the person that everyone says you're the best person in existence, and I think that is sort of what these kind of stories can help tell us. And it's a process for me too. In writing the story, I have to figure that out. I don't have the answers. I mean, the writing for me is also a discovery process.
I like that ending part of just like, not having all the answers and just the process of being a discovery process. Because I think that that's just speaking to in life. I think that life is constantly, I always say lifelong learning, because you're constantly learning. You're constantly just like learning new things that you can apply to just, different aspects. And I think that also speaks to just perspectives and filmmaking. I think what's so great about filmmaking is just being able to showcase those different perspectives and leave it up to the audience interpretation, because like you said, there aren't as a filmmaker or just a person in general, you won't have all the answers. But I think that it's the process of seeking those answers and just being able to interpret it in a way that resonates with you, that's really amazing about just filmmaking. And so, will you be joining us at the festival this year?
I will, yes.
Awesome.
I was there last year too. Our film I edited was there.
And oh, wow.
I had a great time last year. If That Mockingbird Don't Sing, I edited.
Right. Okay, and I remember that one.
Yeah, and so I was there, and I had a great time. I was only there a day last year. I'll be there all 3 days. I'll be there 3 days this year. But I had a great time last year, so I'm looking forward to this year.
Yes,
just as much. Absolutely.
Well, listen, we're happy to have you back for another year and 2 additional days this year. So that's awesome. We look forward to seeing you in person. And again, you can check out Criterion at Block the Asbury TA 11 on Saturday, March 28th, 2026, between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. We will see you at the Garden State Film Festival this year. 200 films from various countries will be screening across 9 venues, again, throughout Asbury Park and Cranford, New Jersey. There will be parties, there will be panels, events, and more. You can get your tickets now at gsff.org/tickets. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Frank.
My pleasure.
We really, really appreciated having you, and we'll see you at the festival.
Great. I'm looking forward to it.
Take care.